Thank you so much for this invitation. I'm Olivia Mejias, a Chilean geologist, and I'm doing my first year of my PhD. I'm so happy to share this information with you, this presentation, taking maybe 5 or 6 last months working on this. So it's about indium specifically, a critical metal assessed by LIPS technology in a polymetallic deposit northeast of Queensland. So as an outline, I will talk a little bit about critical metals, some details about Valgemo mine and why it's a really good case of study to apply this technology. Also some information about laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy, or the acronym LIPS. I'm going to, just a second, change this. Okay, and the workflow and Indium result using this technology and some next steps. So this diagram is very useful to recognize the number of elements from the periodic table for the development of green technology mainly, and how this increased in the recent years. And indium is part of this element and also is considered as a critical metal because indium has a high risk of supply and also a high economic importance for several countries. So several countries are considered indium in its list. It's because indium, its functionality is part of the relevant low carbon technologies such as solar photovoltaic. And also indium has a high projected demand for 2050. And this kind of technology, of course, is related to sustainable development goals such as number 7, affordable and clean energy, and other goals. And also for other point of view, indium is considered with a really low percentage of recycling rate. So from different point of view, indium is a really critical metal. So in terms of geology, either ore deposit and also mine waste materials, both are sources for critical metals and of course for indium. But the point is try to create knowledge about the determination and identification of tenor and deportment of indium into ore and gangue mineral, because this information is really essential for geometallurgical point of view. So in Queensland, there are at least 3,000 million of tons of waste rock related to abandoned mine. So it's not only about potential for secondary exploration, it's about minimize environmental risk. So my PhD research is identify resources of indium in Queensland mine waste and determine geometallurgical property in order to extract this critical metal. So as objective 1, the idea is to identify tools as LIPS, for example, to use in fieldwork to assess critical metal in mine waste materials. But as a starting point, the idea was to use in drill core samples. So Valgemo is located in the north of Queensland, and also is considered an indium resource worldwide. And since 2019, it's considered, or its status abandoned because some contamination issues as reported related to acid mine drainage. So this is a really good case to study for the potential to recover or recognize indium and other critical metals that could be recovery, and also this opportunity to decrease or minimize environmental risk. So LIPS, this is laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy. For this project, we use this specific model. It's a handheld analyzer. It's a really comfortable instrument to assess element. The specific model used was this SIAP C300, which covered this spectrometer range in nanometers, and also include atomic optical emission spectroscopy. So the good thing about this model that can assess all the elements in the periodic table that include light element. So how LIPS works? So once the laser beam hits the surface of the sample, a plasma plume is created. So the element emits a specific color of light, and this combination of colors are a unique signature for each element. It's like a fingerprint. So once the detector can detect this information, the wavelength of these specific lines reveals the element present, and the intensity of this wavelength for specific lines of peak is related to the concentration of each element. So it's a really rapid instrument to detect elements in terms of semi-quantitative information. The diameter of this laser is around 50 microns per pixel. And also this specific model can create element heat maps and include 256 individual pixels. So about this project, I split in these two workflows, one of them running the LIBS and another the data processing using MATLAB codes as a programming methodology. So after select real core samples, this is the total, and identify minerals and textures such as chalcopyrite, pyrite, arsenopyrite, pyrrhotite, cassiterite, and some copper oxide mineral, as well as some textures such as infill, veins, replacement, etc. So the idea was select specific areas to cover all this mineral and all these textures. So the total numbers for running LIBS was 133, as you can see here, some mark of these different areas. So it is worth to mention that in LIBS, LIBS can include different emission lines for each element. That is a brief example for Indium, but also it's good to check the information from NASA, because they also include some emission line information for each element. So the important thing is to recognize a good emission line by element, and also know the outcome from this instrument. So one of them is the data already processed by this instrument. And also you can export all the raw data. That means all the elements with all the emission lines. So the idea was to use this information. So after an internal validation, 126 was the areas for programming. So if each area has that number of pixel per area, that means over 32,000 of data to create mineral and critical metal relationships using these MATLAB codes with the focus or the objective to identify the potential of indium in all organic minerals and also some textures. So as a first result, and also focus on indium and all this mineral that it was recognized, and also different textures, chalcopyrite in this scale for this instrument, of course, is the main indium endowed mineral, followed with pyrrhotite. This is the dark blue represent the total of intensity per mineral, arsenopyrite and pyrite. So in terms of textures, infill massive sulfide, the purple one, is the texture display the highest indium. So if now combine all this information and try to integrate with the other outcome from LIBS, such as elemental heat maps, you can see how the indium distribution is more in the core of this chalcopyrite in infill sulfide massive. And in the case of thinner veins of chalcopyrite, indium is more heterogeneous distribution. So as a next steps, the idea is to use this technology applying fieldwork from different manways, not only about Valgaemon, that means other prospects could have a good concentration of indium in the northeast of Queensland. Also, all this information from LIBS as a semi-quantitative, try to validate or calibrate with quantitative techniques. The amounts it's already prepared. This is 25 that cover all this mineral and all this texture that already mentioned. Also, the data is continue using MATLAB codes, but apply for beyond indium. This is some progress at the moment, including also base metal. This is also a good idea to calibrate if it makes sense. So, for example, copper, the mineral is chalcopyrite, the main hoster, but zinc could be chalcopyrite, maybe related to sphalerite, of course, but also pyrite in the case of cobalt, and we are preparing now about gallium and germanium as well. Another thing is after this calibration, but now I use some information from data collection from literature review. So the idea was use the information from LIBS, the red one. You can see here some sulfide assessed by LIBS, but the idea was to recognize the correlation with information from different literature review and compare the average with concentration of indium inside this element. So the regression was 0.9. That is really good in terms of matrix, because when tried to include cassiterite, the regression was decreased or less. So that means the matrix effect in this kind of technology is really important. And also some exercise about compare different matrix or materials. This is the chalcopyrite from Valgaemon in the wet flame or emission line of indium. This is the oxide copper from Valgaemon as well. And the orange one, this one is another kind of, it's from other part, but it's also copper sulfide. So all of them has the same pattern. So could be another kind of to understand more this technology and its application in critical metals. So, sorry. And the last one, of course, try to publish of this workflow and application more in mine waste material after understand more in this kind of ore samples. So thank you so much.